Hello guys, welcome to the channel. This is Alchemy, welcome to Alchemized, and today I wanted to show you a really special video. It's a Ormus method, an Ormus recipe, and this recipe I haven't found anywhere on YouTube. I found it years ago looking through the internet in an alchemical forum. It's a really simple method, but it creates a really powerful product in the form of Ormus crystals. So the exact amount of ingredients you're going to need here varies depending on the types of salts you use, the room temperature, etc. This is a rough approximation, so you can have enough ingredients to do the process. Around 4 liters of distilled or deionized water is what you're going to need. Also, you can use water that you think has Ormus inside, like spring water, maybe even magnetically trapped water, magnetically rejected water from a Ormus magnet trap, or spring water that you think has Ormus inside. You can do this method with seawater. You can directly add the bicarbonate to the water, but I prefer to make a saturated solution before that when I use the salts. You can just dissolve your salts or just use seawater and then add the bicarbonate, but I prefer to do it this way because it creates a product that has less magnesium and more Ormus elements. You're going to need as well a good quality natural sea salt, around 250 grams. That sea salt works best for beginners because it has a lot of magnesium and creates the most amount of product. And then Celtic sea salt is also great, Atlantic sea salt, Himalayan sea salt. If you mix it with some Epsom salts and Dead Sea salt, also we're going to need around 250 grams of sodium bicarbonate. The amount of bicarbonate we will need depends on the room temperature. It's around 10 grams per 100 milliliters of distilled water. With this method, it takes from 2 to 4 weeks for the crystals to fully form, so we're definitely going to need some patience to add in the ingredients list. An optional ingredient is to have some coffee filters around, because if your salts have some sand or dirt, you can filter that easily with them. So without further ado, let us begin. The setup I'm going to use is quite basic. It's just a 4-liter jar and an oven dish made out of borosilicate glass. I use this because of the big surface area. You don't need to use a big flask like this one. I just didn't have any other on hand. Since I didn't calculate exactly what the temperature is, so I know how much bicarbonate to use, I will just keep adding bicarbonate till it doesn't dissolve anymore. And then I will only use the liquid that stays on top without using the bicarbonate that stays at the bottom. This is not an exact recipe, and the quantity of ingredients you will need varies on the salts you use and the temperatures. This method is actually just the first step of a formula that is intended to create an Ormus which is free of the magnesium, so it creates an Ormus that's almost as potent as the one made from the pure metal. This is a complicated formula which I'll explain further in other videos. Even at the first stage of this formula, we are already creating a superior product, much more potent than most other recipes, because of the fact that the bicarbonate slowly raises the pH only until 8.5. That way, less magnesium precipitates, and we have more concentration of the Ormus elements. In this video, we will focus on the first part of that formula. We can accelerate the growth of the crystals by adding an aquarium air pump to the equation, or by directing a fan on top of the liquid. This is by far my favorite method of making Ormus, because once the crystals are formed, you can directly consume the product without even having to wash it, because the product is more compact and there is much less salt in between the crystals. The white cloth filter you see there is just a kitchen utensil I found that makes it easier for me to filter my salts on top of a jar. Sometimes I filter my salts directly through the white cloth. In this case, I was going to filter it through a filter as well. But as I said, I didn't have an extra jar, so I didn't do it at the end. The reason I needed an extra jar is because I had undissolved bicarbonate in the flask and I didn't want to mix my salts in an unfinished solution. So, sorry about this step, just skip it if you don't want to filter your salts. Normally, I would be more patient in dissolving my bicarbonate, but in this case, I kinda messed up with the flasks I was using. After a while of stirring, we should be left with a saturated bicarbonate solution and perhaps some undissolved bicarbonate that quickly settles at the bottom. For this, I'm just going to use the liquid on the top, and I will try not to use any of the undissolved bicarbonate at the bottom. After we've created our saturated solution, the next step is to dissolve our salts in that solution. After stirring it a couple of times and waiting it to dissolve for a while, we are left with a saturated bicarbonate solution. After that, I pour slowly the solution in another jar so I can separate it from the undissolved bicarbonate. Since I didn't calculate my measurements, I'm left over with a lot of bicarbonate. I add some more distilled water so I can create some more solution to dissolve my salts with. I see that there is still undissolved bicarbonate in the jar, so I added some more water so it fully dissolves. Finally, after overcomplicating things a lot, I take my oven dish, which I will use to crystallize the Ormus. You can use any other container, I just use this because it has a big surface area and helps the crystals form faster. I could have much more easily dissolved my salts in the 4-liter jar, but it's easier for you to see how the salts dissolve in the oven dish, and also I was afraid not all the bicarbonate had dissolved, so pouring it in the oven dish was just to make sure all the bicarbonate was dissolved completely. Even though we were just dissolving bicarbonate for the last minutes, I promise you it was worth it. The simplicity of this method is astonishing, and we're already half there. The next thing we have to do is to dissolve our salts inside the saturated solution. After your salts are fully dissolved is when you can filter them if you see the need to. In this case, it was not really necessary because the salts were mostly clean. But if you use Celtic sea salts or even Dead Sea salts, sometimes they have rocks and sediments, sand, and it's easily filtered through a coffee filter. After your salts are fully dissolved, nothing really appears to happen. As I said, this method creates Ormus crystals, which take around 2 to 3 weeks to fully form. Just be patient and leave it in a dark room where no dust can fall on top of the liquid. What is happening is that the sodium bicarbonate slowly releases carbon gas. The pH of the solution slowly rises to a max of 8.5. There's a lot of benefits to this method compared to others. We don't need a pH meter, and the pH slowly rises only till 8.5, which will create an Ormus that has less magnesium and more Ormus elements. Here we can clearly see a reaction taking place as the bubbles of carbon gas start to accumulate. As I said, this reaction is slow, so I tried to make a nice time-lapse video for you. Although the end result is not as satisfying as I would have liked, because I use my phone for recording, unfortunately, because I don't have a better camera for now. But I hope you enjoy the slowly forming crystals, and the end result is quite satisfying. I tried different lighting and settings so we could see the crystals form, but the zoom of this camera and the focus is really bad. As you can see, slowly but surely these nice crystals start forming in fractal forms, and it's really nice to see them grow. After a few weeks have passed by and you don't see that any new crystals start forming, the process is done. If you think you use too much salts or too little bicarbonate, you can add some more saturated bicarbonate solution and wait a while and see if any new crystals start forming after a day or two. Only a few days have passed by, and we already have a nice layer of crystals on the top, which is quite thin and can actually be consumed right away. After about a week, we already have a nice layer of crystals formed on the top. Also, we have some carbon gas trapped under the crystals. I'm going to break some of the crystals so you can see better what we've created. Most of the crystals form on the top, but some of them form on the side of the vessel. Also, some of them fall down at the bottom. If they get stuck on the top, like in this experiment, just break them after a week and see if more crystals start forming. Do the same after a week again, and if no crystals form, you can add some saturated bicarbonate solution. If after a week no crystals have formed, then you have fully precipitated all of the Ormus possible with this method. The easiest way to find out if you finished precipitating everything is just to measure the pH. If it's 8.5, you're done, because the bicarbonate will not raise the pH further. You can easily collect all the crystals and then wash them. The end product is a compact crystal that has much higher density than the loose hydroxide precipitate, so the washes will take you minutes instead of days. Also, you will need much less washes to fully take away all the salt, and after that you can filter it through, air dry it or dry it in a gas oven. I prefer to keep the dry crystals as they are, but you can use a mortar to fully make it a powder. And as I said, this is just the first stage of a more complete formula that creates a really powerful Ormus. I will upload a video about how that is done in the future. And as always, thanks for watching. Remember to comment, rate, share and subscribe if you like the content. And if you want to support me on Patreon, I'll put the link down below. All the content that I upload on YouTube will be at least 24 hours before that uploaded on Patreon. Hope you found this recipe interesting, and see you in the next video. Stay safe, stay healthy, peace.